In the bell tower of a cathedral in northern Italy, there is a wooden bucket. It is a replica. The original is kept downstairs in the town hall under better conditions. It is an ordinary bucket, oak staves, iron bands, the kind of thing you would draw water with. It has been in that city since 1325, and it is there because it was stolen from the city 20 miles down the road, which has never entirely let it go. You will find this story on lists of absurd wars. The war fought over a bucket, 2,000 dead over a piece of kitchen equipment. And that framing is not wrong exactly, but it has the causation backwards, which is the interesting part. Nobody went to war over a bucket. They stole a bucket because they were already at war and had been in various forms for about a century. The bucket is not the cause. The bucket is a trophy that got mistaken for a cause, which is a thing that happens more often than you would like. So let's do the real version. Start with the two cities. Modena and Bologna sit about 25 miles apart in the plain of northern Italy. Both are old. Both were, in the 14th century, independent city-states, wealthy, walled, and governing their own surrounding territory. And the borders between them were not lines on a map. They were disputed village by village, mill by mill, river crossing by river crossing. That alone would generate conflict. But there was a much larger structure sitting on top of it, and this is the part usually left out of the funny version. For roughly 2 centuries, Italy had been divided by an argument about who was in charge of Christendom. On one side, those who backed the Holy Roman Emperor. On the other, those who backed the Pope. The two factions had names, and they were not abstract. They determined who you married, who you traded with, which families were exiled from your city, and which side you fought on when the fighting started, which was often. Modena was on the imperial side. Bologna was on the papal side. So these were not two towns that fell out. They were two towns on opposite sides of the defining political division of medieval Europe, sharing a disputed border. They had been fighting intermittently for generations, and in 1325 it escalated. Modena's forces took a fortified position in disputed territory. Bologna, which was substantially the larger and richer city, decided to settle the matter properly and raise an army. The numbers that come down to us are contemporary claims and should be treated carefully, but Bologna's force was considerably larger. Something like 30,000 against Modena's 7,000. Even allowing for medieval exaggeration, the disparity was real. They met at a place called Zappolino on the 25th of November, and Bologna lost badly. The larger army was broken in the course of an afternoon. The reasons are the usual ones. Bologna's force was largely a civic militia raised for the occasion. Modena's was smaller but included a substantial body of professional heavy cavalry, some of it supplied by allies, and it was better led. A militia that has never maneuvered together does not hold a line against professionals. Bologna's army broke and ran back toward the city. And then comes the bucket. The Modenese pursued them right up to Bologna's walls and stopped. They did not have the numbers or the equipment to besiege a city that size. So they did what you do when you have won a battle but cannot take a city. They made a point. They plundered the countryside around the walls. They destroyed some fortifications, and on the way out, from a well just outside the city gates, they took the bucket, an ordinary wooden bucket. They carried it back to Modena and put it on display. And that is the entire story of the bucket. It is not what the war was about. It is what somebody grabbed at the end of an afternoon that had gone well. Now, why did it stick? Because it was the perfect insult. Bologna had raised an enormous army, lost it, and had a bucket taken from a well outside its own gates by the smaller city it had come to punish. The bucket said all of that without a word. It was portable, displayable, and completely worthless, which is precisely what made it so effective. If they had taken gold or a relic or a banner, Bologna could have demanded it back as valuable property, and the argument would have been about value. A bucket cannot be argued about. Keeping it was pure statement, and Modena has kept it for 700 years. There are records of Bologna requesting its return. The requests were declined. The bucket became a fixture of local identity and stayed one. It appears in a mock heroic poem written 3 centuries later, which took the battle and treated it as a war fought over the bucket itself, for comic effect. That poem was popular, and it is where the modern framing comes from, which should sound familiar if you have watched anything else on this channel. A satirical work gets taken literally a few centuries later and becomes the version everybody knows. So the war was not about a bucket. But here is the part worth sitting with, because it is not simply a correction. Look at what the war was actually about. A dispute about which distant authority held ultimate power, carried on between 2 towns that mostly just wanted the same fields, mills, and river crossings. Neither the emperor nor the pope was at Zappolino. Neither of them lost anything that afternoon. Around 2,000 people are thought to have died in a field over a question that was decided eventually elsewhere by other people for other reasons, which means the honest version of this story is not that the bucket was a ridiculous cause. It is that the bucket was the most tangible thing anybody got out of the whole affair. Everything else was a grand argument about universal authority that the people fighting had almost no stake in and no control over. The bucket they could carry home. It is still there. You can go and look at it. And the sign beside it will tell you about a war fought over a bucket, which is not true, and which is a much kinder story than the real one.